Okay. Hi, so welcome Whitney and Jeff. Thanks so much for joining me today. For our readers who are unfamiliar with your books, I'm just going to show off Patterns of Power real quick from what's in my library, and then we'll get started. So this is the book that we're going to primarily be talking about today, which is the 1 through 5 book. As you can see, it's tabbed. It's a great resource. And then there's a book for bilingual writers, which is here. The most recent one, which I know has some different co-authors, is the grades 6 through 8. And I know pre-K through kindergarten's coming out soon, and 9 through 12 is coming out next year. There are notebooks, and there's just so much here. So I want to talk to you a little. It's amazing. So I just want to talk a little bit about, for anyone who's unfamiliar, about the structure of a Patterns of Power lesson. So if you can touch a little bit on the 10-minute invitations and how that works across several school days, that would be great.
Well, what our hope is in the Patterns of Power process is to give an unintimidating way in to really studying meaning and effect rather than right and wrong. So we start off on the first day of 10 minutes. We say borrow 5 minutes from Writer's Workshop and 5 minutes from Reader's Workshop and create 10 minutes of magic. 10 minutes of magic. And the first day of 10 minutes of magic is the invitation to notice, which is where we put up a text that demonstrates and acts as our co-teacher as the kids talk about what they notice and what they see. And then by response, we honor what they say, and when needed, we name and extend. It's responsive, but we get to make decisions about what we stretch out and what we don't stretch out. And we really mean it. When we ask, what do you notice? Really anything they notice, as long as it's about that sentence up there or they're spurred from that sentence up there, they can wonder, and it's really non-intimidating. And some teachers are a little afraid of it because it's loose structure, but it really doesn't have that loose of a structure, because once you put the sentence up, there's only a limited amount of things you can talk about.
Right.
But they keep going. They keep going when we ask what else. And then the second day, we pull in an imitation of the original mentor text that we've been studying, which is usually a sentence, maybe a little more if it requires that, but usually a sentence. And we have that together, and then they get to compare and contrast the imitation with the model, which takes them deeper into the pattern of power or grammar skill that we want them to know. And we learn a lot through contrast. Then the next 10-minute day, so we're on day 3 now, we do the invitation to imitate. And this is where we really take a moment and we try to model, again, how you might imitate, how you can use your reader's eyes and your writer's eyes. Your reader's eyes see the author's pattern, your writer's eyes kind of see your world, that you write about what you want to write about. So we've modeled that in the step on day 2 when they've had the imitations, but now they get to, we get to model the actual think aloud as we're doing it. So we do a shared imitation, and then we allow for either paired or individual imitation or interactive imitation. They're all taking a little bit of different points for different reasons we need those. And so we suggest, even on that part, allow that to stretch over more than one day if you need to. You can go as many, you can accordion out there. In fact, we don't want it to be a race. We kind of prescribe that you take 2 weeks for each one. And if you finish early and you want to start something new on a Thursday, did you know you could, and you still get away with it? Then we celebrate, of course, what writers are able to do, because as Debbie Miller said, what's celebrated gets repeated. And we don't want to cut that. And then last but not least is kind of a bridge between best practice and test practice, called the invitation to edit. Because oftentimes people are like, I want to teach my kids to edit, so they need to be, marking up something. But really, to teach a kid to edit, first they need the foundations of what it's supposed to look like, what it means, and such. So we are teaching editing even when we're just noticing and comparing and contrasting and imitating. And that's
Jeff, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second on that.
Add to it, Whitney. You're good.
In between the invitation to celebrate and the invitation to edit, we have a step called the invitation to apply.
It's really important.
We don't want to skip that one. So with the invitation to celebrate, we say don't skip that because that's really the jumping off point to the application and transfer. We're celebrating what they were able to do with scaffolds in place. And now during this invitation to apply, we're showing them, look, you can use verbs that show action anywhere or anytime you write, not just during this time. So the invitation to apply is where we take that skill into other parts of our day, or we take it deeper or in a different way. So we have that piece before we end with that invitation to edit.
Awesome.
And then also we have the focus phrase that's in there. And that's
It's a whole nother thing.
It is, but that's during the invitation to notice, our students are noticing everything in that sentence, but that sentence was pulled specifically to demonstrate a certain concept. And so through their conversations, they discover what it is that we want to teach them, and we get to share that through the focus phrase. So Jeff, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that focus phrase.
Well, no, just that that's the learning target. Like I capitalize names. I use adjectives to tell what kind and how many. They give it a more specific target for them to get, because they're learning all that other thing incidentally that's in the sentence. It's burning into their visual stores. But the cool thing is we also have these focus phrases, which they love to use. They write them down on their papers sometimes when they're looking at them, because they internalize them. So we found that's been the best thing. That came from, the focus phrase came from Construction Zone by Terry Thompson. So
yeah, I was going to say I read that in the book, and because I'm a slightly neurotic mother, I do make my daughter, who's a rising 5th grader, do work over the summer. And we actually started with, hold on, I have it right here. I capitalized the first letter of a letter greeting and closing, the one with from the David Crayons Quit. Yeah. So, and then actually we just got to the point where she actually wrote a real letter today, which I'm going to put in the post. So it'll be below our interview. So, yeah.
And that's that application, right? That's showing
that application. And I noticed how she, and she used the focus phrase, like when we were talking today about like writing this thank you note for a gift that she got. It was, you know, repeating the focus phrase. And I think that was a really powerful thing because it's in the first person. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I
real life
teachers take
application.
those focus phrases and even move those into their editing checklists. So then the writers have this better understanding of what those checklists are asking them to do.
It's not just a box that says capitalization next to it that they're supposed to check, but like I capitalize names. I capitalize the first word of a direct quotation or whatever it is you're teaching at that moment. That's what comes up.
I think that's a really powerful point about the editing checklist. I've been a big believer in personalizing those for years, and I think that's a great way to do it. And then it becomes even more personal when it's in the first person. So.
Well, and when we use the focus phrases or those I statements, when they're editing, it's no longer about fixing their mistakes because they don't see mistakes in their writing, right? And it is more about, oh, this is what I do as a writer, and I do this for my reader, right? It's all about meaning and effect. So they have a better understanding of why we edit.
The special effects devices of writing, it's all about meaning. It's really not about right and wrong. Meaning and effect.
Right. So here in Pennsylvania, we're, you know, getting started with our school year. Other places are already started. Other places are going back after Labor Day. So with that in mind, knowing that, you know, everyone is either at or approaching the start of school, can you talk about how one would implement this in a primary upper elementary classroom, maybe giving some examples of like what you would start with? How do teachers know where to start? These books are huge. They are amazing resources. How does someone know where to begin?
Well, we can pull, you know, from our standards, of course, we can do that. And if you need a scope and sequence, a suggested one that's standards aligned, we have those on our Stenhouse website. So those are available. But we also encourage you to take a look at what your writers are doing just in their samples that they're producing for you at the beginning. We always do these cold samples at the beginning to see our starting point, and you can decide what it is that they are doing already right? And what they're ready for next, and pull the lessons from there. When looking through that huge book, it's not about doing every single lesson in that book. We wouldn't have time to do that, nor would that be appropriate. The book is really organized across levels of complexity. So you'll see the color coding on the outside there. So the green section is the first section of the book. That's your basics of a sentence, right? So that's your least complex skills. And then we add complexity as we go further into the book. And then the chapters are written the same way. So the verb lessons, the very first one is the least complex. The last one, of course, is the most complex. So you're able to, knowing that, dive into it depending on where your students are with their complexity.
And that stays true throughout the series, whether it's 6 through 8, 9 through 12, pre-K through 1.
Yes.
Great.
I also tell the teachers, if you bought the book and you're excited and you want to go, you could just read chapter 2 into the classroom to get you started. But everything, once you get into the lesson plan, you know you have a 2-day lesson plan. But the nice part is there's even visuals that you can put under your document camera that are ready to go. And we tried to put tip boxes and all sorts of things that would be dealing with that lesson and that concept to support those teachers that are feeling maybe less confident about grammar. So they have Whitney and I there and the power notes and other ways to kind of help them see what they could do or what kids might ask and what you might be able to say.
Yeah, those are really nice. It kind of feels like having you whisper in, which is a great coaching tool.
For sure. For sure.
So I just want to talk about the harsh reality that we're still living in, is that as the school year goes on, the Delta variant's still here, COVID is still here, gosh knows if there's going to be another variant, and we might land up with a couple weeks of remote teaching, a day of remote teaching here or there, or going back to remote. And I know that no one wants to hear that, but could you share a few quick tips for teaching conventions remotely? Like how can teachers keep kids engaged with lessons through a screen?
Well, we had great success with this last year as we all learned together, both synchronously and asynchronously. So we could continue this conversation where we show the lesson through the PowerPoint that we make, or if we're using Patterns of Power Plus, which is our grade level specific, we have those lessons in PDF ready to go for remote learning. We have a whole link on the companion website for that. So they share their sentence and we can engage in conversation if we are live with them, whether they're in breakout rooms talking about it. I've seen this. My daughter was in 4th grade last year, so I got to see it all in action. And sometimes they would go into breakout rooms, sometimes they would have whole class conversations, and then asynchronously, they would go into the slide and type in what they noticed, right? And so they were able, and then come back as they continued through the process, the teacher would bring them back to quickly talk about some of the things that were noticed or compared, contrasted. And then they would do the imitation, together and go through the process, either synchronously or asynchronously. Saw a lot of Google Classroom used and Jamboard, Padlet, Seesaw was used a lot. So it was a way for students to still continue to grow as writers and make their own choices. And honestly, it was something my daughter looked forward to. Out of all of her learning, that was the one she knew the process, right? So she felt already comfortable in it. She knew what was coming next, and she was excited to talk to her friends about it because she didn't get to see her friends, but she was still able to talk to her friends about it.
And she knows where her bread is buttered. Okay, the other thing I'd like to mention is there's a great little webinar.
Yeah.
Again, when you go to the page, like you're going to buy the Patterns of Power book, if you go down on the left-hand side, there's a resources. And if you click on the resources, not only are there videos of Whitney and I teaching in a 1st grade classroom, in a 4th grade classroom, in a 3rd grade classroom for free, there are links to the podcast, there are links to the webinar that we did on both just generally on the book, but also on doing this digitally. And in the 6 through 8 and 9 through 12 books, since they came out during that, actually have an appendix in the back that show how it works and how you could do each step of the invitational process in the Patterns of Power. what we figured out though, is it's so general in terms of just setup and use. You could almost use it even in elementary too, if you were interested in it. So,
Okay, and I'll make sure to link that in the underneath this interview. So,
And I know
Thank
that
you.
one thing I discovered, it's just like workshop, they know that structure, right? So I know workshop overall was able to continue digitally. Maybe it wasn't the exact same, but that structure was still there and they knew what I'm getting a mini lesson. Now I'm going to go off and read, or now I'm going to go off and write. And so I feel like this process was the same thing. It was already there. They know, so they know what to do. And it's less threatening as they're trying to learn everything else digitally for both the teacher and the students.
absolutely, absolutely. So speaking of the 6th through 8th book, Jeff, can you just talk a little bit more about it? That's, very new. I don't remember what month it came out, but I know it's really new. If you can just talk a little bit about how it kind of builds on the 1 through 5, that would be great.
Well, we did a couple of things differently in here, but we basically build on the 6 through 8 standards. And so we use specific sentences. It's more complex. Same process. Got a couple of different things. We were able to do these charts in both the middle school and high school book that are pattern, purpose, craft that come at the beginning of the chapter to kind of give you that brush up if you need it. Or if you're one of those people that just knows grammar but doesn't know why, have some things that are concrete and grounded for the kids in words. We also have a song list that you can like QR code to Spotify and some stuff. So it has some other bells and whistles added that we didn't think of.
Yeah.
You get new people, you think of new things. And
Yeah.
And so basically that's it. It really does echo, but at a higher level, more complex sentences, more types of complex sentences.
And then if you can talk a little bit about what's coming down the pike, which is the pre-K through 1st grade one, just, I guess, say a little bit more. What's that going to look like for our, earliest learners?
You go lead writer.
I'm the lead writer on that one, so I get to talk.
Her name is first. Her name is first.
My name is first. So while Jeff was working on the middle school, I got to really take the lead on Patterns of Wonder, which is inviting emergent writers to play with the conventions of language. And there's a huge focus on play in it. Excuse me. This has been my passion project. The emergent writing is my favorite writing.
I see you're getting all choked up.
I know, I get so excited. But the Patterns of Wonder, the lessons in there are a precursor to Patterns of Power. But I feel like this is going to be a resource that teachers can use whether their school uses Patterns of Power or not. It's really going to support them with all of the varied writing that is going on in their classrooms. And so the process is fewer steps. We still have the notice, but instead it's wonder. What do you wonder? Because everything is new to them, right? And so they get to just, we share an entire page from a picture book. So we're looking at both pictures and words, and we're really building on the oral language of our storytelling language or our informational language as we wonder about what the pictures are showing us and how those are tying to the words when we get to that point. So we have that, and then we still have a compare contrast, but of course it's by page rather than sentences. We still have imitate together, and then we have this step called play, the invitation to play, and we put it out there for them just to play with this skill in so many different ways, both orally and through pictures and through words, and then we end with that celebration. So that's the process, right? And then the way the lessons are organized is we broke them into 4 phases of emergent writing. So we call it the Patterns of Wonder phases of emergent writing. I took surveys from teachers, and I really leaned on the wonderful Katie Wood-Ray and Matt Glover and the work they've done with emergent writing. And of course, the way our standards are lined up as well.
And Matt Glover wrote the foreword.
And Matt Glover did write our foreword. I'm so thankful for that. And so We have the scribbles phase, right? So our students who are just picking up that pencil and making some marks, we have lessons to support them heavily in oral language as they tell about these marks that are on the page. And then we have the phase that we are calling symbol and letter writing. So that's your mock letters. And then when you see their names inside the writing with all of those letter strings. So we're supporting them, continuing to support in oral language and adding in the details of those pictures as we're continuing to learn what words are and letters. And then we have the transitional phase, which is that big, huge magic between the symbol and letter and the conventional, right? Where they begin to discover that letters make words and words make sentences. And there's things called spaces and capital letters and lowercase letters, and that can all tie to my pictures. And so we're beginning to support them more in their written language. And then we have the section on conventional, which is a nice segue into the work that we do in Patterns of Power. So I
And
am
whether it's
thrilled
pre-K,
about it.
whether it's pre-K or grade 12, it's the ultimate reading and writing connection. The conventions intertwine reading and writing, and there where meaning is activated. And I think looking at it that way is going to help early readers as well as more sophisticated readers later on down the line.
Well, and I think it's about writing with intent, right? And everything that we do on the
Purpose.
page is a choice. Purpose. There's purpose and craft behind everything we do, whether we are scribbling on a page versus, we're writing these essays. And so we're able to really support our writers and grow them in that way.
Well, as the mom of a 4-year-old, I'm really excited to see what that looks like. So he's in
You're
that
gonna
second
love it.
phase,
I'm just,
so-
every time I get something back on it and I'm looking through it, I just get even more excited.
And you look very joyful talking about it.
Yes,
which is great, so.
it's my passion for
Very
sure.
cool. Very
So-
cool. Well, thank you both for your time today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully this will help some folks launch into some more work around language conventions this year and in a way that's going to make it inviting and joyful, because it really can be. And I think Patterns of Power really does show us how to do that. So thank you. I think you're muted,
Oh, I
Jeff.
was telling Stacy that I read it every single morning. That's the very first thing I read. So I'm excited. I'm kind of a little fangirling right now because I love all.
She's excited. I'm excited. And thanks for letting us share the patterns of people patterns of people have patterns of power and the power of possibility. So thanks again. And we're honored to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.